going, everyone? Tim here, TRD Adventures. Hope everyone's all well out there. As always, thanks for tuning in. Well, a new version of the SORRCA rules have dropped. A very more refined version. Lots of changes, more definitions, stuff like that. A much more true final version that looks like it's going to carry well into 2023 and start the comp year off. So I think it is now time to get down and start talking about the classes and the rules and stuff like that. We'll touch base on each class individually in their own video, and then a section when it comes time to scale points and stuff like that. So, as I mentioned in the first SORRCA video, we went a lot over the overall guidelines, a lot of the big changes that we saw. Now, again, in the description below, you'll see this disclaimer at the beginning of the next few videos, anything related to the SORRCA rules. So, in the description below, I have linked to the OneDrive file that contains the SORRCA rules, as well as a link specifically to the diagrams and also to the SORRCA page. Highly recommend looking at the rules and printing them off if possible. It is going to make World a lot easier. If anything, at least printing off the diagrams. And then from there, you can mark things and stuff like that. And then you can read along with the rules and make sure you're all good. But also, part of the disclaimer, the new SORRCA rules are a living rule set, which means they can change periodically at times throughout the year. Everything from minor changes to certain major changes. So at any point you're watching any of these videos, make sure whatever rule set you're reading is the most current version of the rules. They could very well be different than what we are doing videos on. And in the future, major changes, stuff like that, I will do specific update videos on the changes and go from there. So as always, make sure you have the most current SORRCA rules available to you, and that is what you are reading. Let's get down to it. In this video, we're going to talk about the infamous rectangle that literally took everyone's mind and went poof. It got everybody. It was kind of confusing at first. So the diagrams have been updated to this versus this. So much larger, easier to follow along than just putting all the views on one page. We have multiple pages for certain views. In addition to that, being that they've been able to make larger, if you can see here, there is, other than the actual rectangles, because that's all we had initially was these rectangles and it was kind of confusing. In here, there is a reference outline of a vehicle, and it happens to be the ever-popular Hilux body. So if you're building a Hilux, the rectangle diagrams are going to be spot on for you. So there is a reference line on the vehicle here to show what it's talking about. And when you're reading any of the rules, class 1, 2, 3, look at the diagrams. They're going to refer to the overall rectangle, which is broke down into the front, center, and rear. Best way to describe the rectangles overall is it is your build area. It is your gray area. It is defined. It has limits. It has maximums. It has sizes and measurements. So your entire build area, your body, the rectangles, the outlined shaded rectangles are your build parameters. That is what your body must fit. Body and bumpers must fit inside those rectangles. They must either meet or exceed the rectangle. They can't be smaller, meet or exceed, and everything's going to be legal. Now, at any time, we're referring to measurements on the rectangle. These measurements are taken at full compression. That has been changed from how it was initially in the beta drop. Full compression check now. Take your truck, set it at the tech table, or if you're building, and press down full compression. You don't have to slam it down, but full compression, where your suspension stops. That is full compression. And that is then where you measure. Measure your body lines, measure your body heights, measure your bumper heights, anything height related. It is done at full compression check. In addition to that, when it is talking about that, it is specifically talking about bumpers and body and or cage work if you have like a Jeep or a custom body and the top half is cage. It does not include shackles, fair leads, roof racks, stuff like that. Those are separate entities from the body and bumpers themselves. So you're not going to be able to cheat the system with an overly aggressive stinger out one direction or an excessively tall roof rack. It's not going to work that way. Just the body and the bumpers. That is what we're looking at when we're talking about the rectangles. And real quick here, we're just going to use the class 2 because it's easier to show things. When you're talking about a front section, center section, and rear section. Now, center section does not necessarily reference and mean cab. I know that threw a lot of people at first. Everyone's thinking the center section, that means the cab. Now, there are bodies where the cab is further forward, unimog, or if it is just further back, because there are measurements in there for your center section. It has to be so far from the trailing edge of the front tire and the leading edge of the rear tire. And certain bodies would make it impossible. Example, unimog. If your cab's up here, you obviously can't get within an inch of your rear tire. So center section doesn't necessarily mean cab specific. There are measurements here for the cab itself. Wherever your cab is placed on the vehicle, there is a measurement for that cab, and it has to fit that measurement and then also still meet the criteria for whatever section it is in, whether it be front, middle, or rear. And because I know that through a lot of people, because there are certain cabs that are short and you're just like, you can't get that. Or, well, the bed is the bed, because people are like, well, the bed's not the cab, so that's not the center section. No, it's still a center section, center of the vehicle. In later videos, we'll talk about the actual cab section, because the cab section size requirement does differentiate between class 1, 2, and 3. So whatever class you're building into, note that your cab section is required. Like class 1, I think it's 2x3, and class 2, I think it's also 2x3. A 2x3 section horizontally, that is what's going to be used for measure your cab section, because all three classes, 1, 2, and 3, all have a minimum cab height requirement. So whether your cab's up here, or back here, the cab height must meet that requirement in whatever section it is in. And also, general purpose, what everything's talking about here, wheelbase is always wheel nut to wheel nut. That is your wheelbase of your vehicle in reference to your body. And then, mentioned several times, we have tops of the tires and then tops of the wheel rim. Tops of the tires, tops of the wheel rim. Those are specific in several measurements. And then we have leading edge of front tire, trailing edge of front tire, leading edge of rear tire, trailing edge of rear tire. And then track width. Track width is inside tire bulge to inside tire bulge. Those measurements and those words you will hear described throughout all three classes for each of their own rectangle sections. What we're going to do here, we're going to use the class 2 because it's right here and it's easy to use on the bench. Basically, I'm just going to go through each front view, side view, and top view for the rectangles in reference to your vehicle. So you're knowing, what section you're looking for and what you're looking to measure. We're going to start here with the front view of class 1. As you can see, we have this little yellow section here. That is going to be the bumper. We have the green here. That is the front rectangle section. And then here is the center rectangle section that you can see from the front. So first off here, we're going to touch base on tires. So for class 2, tires, minimum of 4.2 inches in diameter and a maximum of 4.75 inches in diameter. That is per manufacturer specification. The overall width reference is the front inside track from the top tire bulge to the top tire bulge. So in here, tire bulge to tire bulge. That is your track width, and that is the reference you're going to use as your reference throughout the rest of the build and going through the rest of the diagrams. So the center rectangle section width, it must be at least as wide as the inside front track width. Body width measured no higher than the tops of the tire. So your track width, we're going to use easy math on this. Your track width is 6 inches. So your body has to be 6 inches in the center section. It has to be 6 inches wide, the entire length of the center section. So center section right here, and that cannot be measured above the tops of the tires. So top of the tire, this line right here, I can't measure for that 6 inches here or above. It has to be here and below that I obtain that 6-inch measurement. And with a Tundra body, awfully convenient because it bulges at the bottom. The front rectangle section here. The front rectangle section may taper or pinch at its narrowest here in the front, where it would be its narrowest, has to at least be half the width of the inside track width. So again, your track width is 6 inches. Right here at the end of your pinch, it has to at least be 3 inches wide. There you're going to see part here on the front bumper. So for class 2, front bumper is required. Rear bumper is not required, but if it's present, it must meet these following rules. Must have material at least as wide as half the center section below the tops of the tires at full compression. Vertical height of the bumper material must at least be 0.125 inches, 3.2 millimeters, and specified requirement must be beyond the body and wheel rim lengthwise. Note, the required portion of the bumper must meet the above specifications. So, if you're reading right here in class 2, your center section, so your bumper has to be half the width of the center section. So, your bumper has to at least be 3 inches wide, and at 3 inches wide, it has to be, at compression, below the tops of the tire. It can't be below the tops of the tire 2 3/4, and then once it's above the tire, it meets 3 inches. No, it has to be that 3 inches below the top of the tire. Then it can go above and taper off if you want to, but at least for a section, at least 1/8 inch of a section below the top of the tire, your bumper has to at least be 3 inches wide. Again, those are easy math references. And that bumper has to extend past the body and the wheel rim right here. So leading edge of the front rim and trailing edge of the rear rim if you have a rear bumper for scale points. That right there is the front view section for Class 2. And Class 1 and 3 are similar. Obviously, their measurements are going to be different, but easy idea how to read your measurements there. Next, we're going to go with the side view here. I'm going to touch here on the overall part here in the corner. Must be at least 4.25 inches from the bottom edge of the body or slider to the top of the cab or cagework in the section that the cab exists. So, wherever your cab is, whether it's unimog here in the front, center like normal, or back here, wherever it is. So, from the bottom of the slider or body to top of your cab has to at least be 4.25 inches tall. And you're good. Like I said, all 3 classes have a minimum body height now. Next, we're going to talk here on the front rectangle section. So, front rectangle section right here. Front rectangle must extend at least to the top of the tires at full compression, and length must at least be to the leading edge of the front wheel rim. So, your front section has to at least be as tall as your top of your tire. So, your body has to at least be as tall as the top of your tire. Extend to the front of the center section, and then at least be as long as the front of the wheel here in the front. So that is your measurement there that you're looking for. Also similar, the rear section of your body has to at least be as tall as the tops of the tires. It must extend from the back of the center rectangle to at least the trailing edge of the rear wheel. And also here for the center section, it also must extend at least to the tops of the tires at full compression. So for example, like if you had a unimog and all this was empty, your center section still at least has to be at least as tall as your tires. And then more down here on the center rectangle, must be within 2 inches of the trailing edge of the front tire and the leading edge of the rear tire. Body or slider must be below the tops of the wheel rims at full compression the entire length of the center rectangle. So, example here, we're measuring from the leading edge of the rear tire, trailing edge of the front tire. I measure 2 inches back and I put a little tape mark right here. And then same here, I put a little tape mark. So this section right here, this is my center section. So body and center section exist, and I'm within the 2 inches. I can actually get more aggressive. I can actually cut some of this out if I need to. And also in regards, that section cannot be any taller than the wheel rim at full compression. Whether you have body or sliders, whatever the lowest part is, it cannot be above the wheel rim. For front bumper, it must extend beyond the body and again, the leading edge of the front rim. And just like that. Center section, pretty easy to go through. And again, like I mentioned, it gives you breakdowns right here. Top of wheel rim, trailing edge of tire. It gives you everything it's talking about reference-wise, what you're looking at. Then last here, we're going to look at the top view of Class 2. And this is where we start getting creative again. So again, overall height, this is kind of referring to your cab. A 2 by 3 horizontal section of body or cagework must be at or above the minimum height requirement where the cab exists. So wherever your cab exists, here, wherever, a 2 by 3 section must exist, and that 2 by 3 section must meet the height requirement. So wherever it is, again, it has to reference back to that 4.25 inch for Class 2. It's going to go right here on sliders. Must protect the bottom edge of the body and must be at least the entire length of the center rectangle. So wherever your center section is, it has to at least be that long. Rear rectangle here, and it's going to tell you, must be at least half width of the center rectangle, and it starts at the back of the center rectangle and extends to at least the trailing edge of the rear rim. And if you choose to pinch the rear as well, it has to be half the width of the center rectangle, and your center rectangle has to at least be the track width. So if your track width is 6, your center section is 6, the narrowest you can make the rear is 3 inches. And it has to go from the back of the center section to the trailing edge of the rear wheel. And then, talking here on the front rectangle section when viewed from above. Must be at least half the width of the center rectangle at the narrowest. The front rectangle can have a realistic pinch from the center rectangle to the leading edge. The taper must be at least a straight line from the center rectangle edge to the leading edge width. And the length, it must start at the front of the center rectangle and must extend at least to the leading edge of the front wheel. So you can still pinch the front. Now, when you pinch the front at its narrowest, it has to be half width. So 6 inches, it has to at least be 3 inches here in the front. And it has to be a straight line taper. It has to, from here to here, wherever it is, it has to be a straight line. You can't cut it in and then bring it over. Because I know I've done that before. For a pinch, I've just really got aggressive and cut all that. It can't. It has to at least be a straight line now from edge of the center rectangle to wherever your pinch is at the front there. It has to be a straight line. It can't be curvy anymore or cut in and then go straight. And then the last part, looking at bumpers here, again, must extend beyond the body and leading edge of the front wheel rim lengthwise and must be at least half width of the center rectangle sections. So that is it. That is the looking at it from the top view right there. So really wasn't hard going over the rectangle. Now, if you noticed, each one of these, it mentions the same thing a couple times. It mentions almost the same rules across the board. And again, that's just more reiterating the fact of what you need to pay attention to and what specs you need to follow to make everything fit within the rectangle. You know, a lot of times you're looking at all this different stuff, but if you sit down and read, a lot of this stuff may be the same from page to page. It's just giving you a different way to look at it. It doesn't matter whether you're looking at, you know, class 1 or class 3, they're all broke down the same way. They're all just going to have their own individual measurements. Each one does talk about tire minimums, tire maximums. It talks about your cab heights and your cab section as far as the horizontal part of the section. They all have the same, you know, point of reference, you know, track width, top of the tires, leading edge of the wheels, trailing edge of the wheels, etc., etc. So things, major things that go into all the math that determine how your body has to be and how aggressive and crazy you can get with your body. Track width, so everything from a narrowed AR44 to AR60s, all that obviously depends and changes drastically how narrow bumpers can be or how wide bumpers have to be. So you choosing your axles, choosing your wheel offset, that plays into whatever body you choose, how easy it is to make it fit in the rectangle or how much work you have to put in to make it fit the rectangle. A couple other things, wheelbase. Wheelbase also decides the factor, you know, how long the body has to be in class 2 and class 3, specifically based on the wheelbase. Class 1 as well. You still have to have a relatively even-centered wheelbase in class 1. So too long or too short isn't just isn't going to work with certain bodies, especially in class 1. Wheel size definitely plays a factor in choosing things because it's referenced in all class 1, 2, and 3. All of them, the bottom of the body here, the bottom of the center section, cannot be taller than the top of the wheel. So if you're running smaller wheels, you know, 155 wheels, this section is going to have to be lower than, say, me running 2.2 wheels. So I have that much more wheel, you have that much less wheel. And also, when it comes to the front, my wheel also is now this much further forward and this much further rear. So then my body has to be that much longer or my bumper has to be that much further out. So it's a little give and take on what you're choosing, but all those things are factors you have to take into consideration with building. And even, you know, maybe like, man, if I go with these axles, I can use this and everything's gonna be easier. The rectangle, sitting down and reading it, especially with the new everything blown up the way it is, and the fact that there is an outline of a reference vehicle there to give us a better idea, I think definitely helps out a lot, and I think hopefully relieves a lot of the frustration with the rectangle. Doesn't mean we can't still have fun with it, because as you can see, my class 2, I do have lovely rectangles all over the body. I can have fun with this. This is fun with me. I'm enjoying the new rules. It's just a new challenge to me. I enjoy building. I like the challenge of making everything fit in the rules and getting that balance between scale and performance. So that's just how I look at things when it comes to this style and SORRCA and stuff like that. That's it. You know, a lot of factors that can take place in here. And hopefully this helps you out, you know, gives you a little understanding on how to read the rectangle. Because I know specifically on that center section, a lot of people immediately thought the center section meant cab. And that's not necessarily the case. Yes, generally speaking, with most of the bodies we choose, the cab is in the center section. 99% of the bodies, the cab is in the center section. But there are bodies and other options out there, or custom bodies, that can put cabs elsewhere. So, a lot of people immediately thought, because of that, that would immediately alienate several bodies. Some bodies, it, like, honestly just made almost any body impossible to meet if it was specifically talking about the cab, especially When you start getting to class 3, where everything's bigger, everything get a little more crazy, some measurements and some bodies just aren't feasible. So the new measurements where everything's going to be just fine. I'm super happy with it. Any questions, comments, suggestions, anything like that, as always, put it down below. Do my best to get everything answered or figure out an answer if I do not have one. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel down below if you haven't already. And, if anything, I hope this, helped out a little bit, understanding or at least giving you the ability to read through the rectangles and then start looking at your body, seeing what you need to check. If you had an idea and you didn't think it was possible, and now after this, you're like, I think I can make that work. That's awesome. That's what I like to hear. Or if you had a sketchy body, you're like, ah, crap, it's not going to work. Well, now you know. Rather than putting all the work, you know now what to exactly look for and how to measure things and maybe even push those boundaries a little bit. Like I said, the rectangles are being seen as restrictions. I see them as a defined gray area. Like, build it in, fit the rectangles, and you're good. It can be sketchy, it can be gray, it can lose some scale, but as long as it's in the rectangles and it fits the measurements and requirements, it's legal in my book. So, as always, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate the channel support very, very much. So, until the next rectangle, everyone, have a great one. Crawl on.